Hi, my name's Mary's. A week before the family retreat, my sister sent me a text. Don't travel with us. No explanation, no apology, just silence, again. But that wasn't the worst part. What hurt more was realizing it wasn't a mistake. It had been years in the making slow erasure. They'd cut me from the group chats, the family photos, and finally, the deed to the house my father left behind. So I did what they never expected. I let them walk right into the beach house I secretly owned. And when the clerk asked, "Are you with Miss Enlow's party?" Well, they finally had to say my name out loud. But how did we get here? And what would you do if your family rewrote the story without you? The morning started like most others, quiet, still, sunlight dripping through the blinds in soft stripes across my desk. My coffee had already gone cold by the time I saw the message. It lit up my phone screen with a casual finality I hadn't expected. Don't travel with us, it's better this way. Just that. No punctuation, no explanation. Just Valora, my sister, writing me out of yet another chapter. At first, I blinked, thinking maybe it was a joke, something taken out of context, a poor attempt at sarcasm. But Valora didn't joke. Especially not with me. Especially not since Dad died. I stared at the text for a long time, letting it settle in the air like dust. It wasn't until my throat went dry that I realized I hadn't spoken all morning. There was no invitation, no RSVP. No, "We hope you'll come." Just that one message like being handed a door that only opened one way. I didn't reply. What was there to say? I sat back in my chair and turned slowly toward my screen, flicking the mouse to wake it. My email loaded, and instinctively I typed retreat into the search bar. The most recent chain appeared instantly: Retreat 2023, confirmations. There were threads, replies, attachments, but none of them included me. Not even one. It didn't look like I had been forgotten. It looked like I'd been removed. Intentionally, cleanly. I scrolled back, way back. The last email I had been looped into was dated 14 months ago, an itinerary for Thanksgiving at Valora's house, that I was welcome to stop by for dessert. That was the language. Dessert. Not dinner. Not stay. Just drop in. Like a neighbor. Like an afterthought. I opened the family group chat. Or rather, the one I used to be part of. Gone. Not archived. Deleted. Or maybe recreated without me. I didn't know anymore. The quiet in the house was starting to feel suffocating, like something pressing in from every side. I tapped my phone and called Mom. Maris. Her voice was polite, clipped, like she was on speaker or in the middle of folding something. She always sounded half busy with me. "I got a message from Valora," I said carefully, "about the retreat." A pause. I know. It was the kind of pause that wasn't empty, but loaded. With avoidance. With knowledge. "She said not to travel with you. She just needs space," Mom said. "It's been a lot this year, and you coming might stir things up." "She's organizing a family retreat," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I'm family." "I'm not getting in the middle," she said quickly. "It's just easier this way." That landed harder than I expected. Not because it was shocking, but because it was familiar. "Easier," I repeated. "You know what I mean?" she added, softer now. "Let it lie, sweetheart. It's just a trip." But it wasn't just a trip. It was the place, the time, the gathering. It was being seen. Or not seen. I didn't fight her. What was the point? We ended the call shortly after. I sat there for a long time, the silence getting heavier by the minute. The kind that doesn't scream, just hums in the background until it swallows everything. Later that afternoon, I opened the family docs folder on my desktop, something I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a subfolder, retreat planning. Inside that, old PDFs, itineraries, even a flyer I had helped design a decade ago when Dad was still alive, and we all fit under one roof without fracturing. Near the bottom, I found the newest file, Retreat 2023, full invite.pdf. It was clean, professionally done, Valora style, Photos of the beach house, a schedule of events, guest list, group activities, welcome bags, even meal themes. My name wasn't there. Not misspelled, not shortened, just absent. A line at the bottom caught my eye. We're so lucky to have such a close family. Let's celebrate that. I shut the laptop. For a second, I let my eyes close. My breath slowed. I'd always told myself they didn't mean to forget me. That maybe it was miscommunication, bad timing, that they assumed I was too busy, too distant, too something. But the truth was quieter than that. It wasn't an accident. They didn't forget. They removed me. And I wasn't angry, not yet. But something in me shifted. Something curious. Something precise. So who sent the invite to the wrong address? That question echoed in my mind all night, bouncing off the walls of my office like a whisper I couldn't silence. Around 10, I pushed aside the remnants of cold takeout and clicked into the shared family drive-a-place I hadn't visited in nearly 2 years. There it was. A new folder, Retreat Memories Valora. My chest tightened before I even opened it. Inside were over 70 photos. The colors were soft, the editing crisp. Everyone was smiling, Elson building a sandcastle, Mom holding a mimosa, Valora and her husband in matching white linen at sunset. There were group shots with quotes overlaid. Family is where love never ends. I clicked through them slowly. Page after page, moment after moment, face after face. But mine wasn't one of them. Not blurred in the background, not cropped at the edge. Just missing. I recognized the angle of one photo, the way the light hit the patio just right. I'd taken that picture. Years ago. I remembered standing there barefoot, holding Dad's old DSLR, waiting for the waves to time themselves with the laughter. And yet, somehow, in this version of the family, I didn't exist. It wasn't just forgetting anymore. It was editing. The kind of exclusion that not born of carelessness, but of precision. When I finally shut the laptop, it was past midnight. I didn't sleep. I laid awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to trace when it all started, when I stopped being worth including. By morning, the sun was creeping into the kitchen through the slats in the blinds. I made coffee out of habit more than need. The house was quiet, except for the low hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the floor settling beneath me. I sent a short message to Lorene, my cousin. She was younger by 6 years, and the kind of person who still signed her texts with emojis. If anyone would respond honestly, it was her. Hey, quick question. Was I ever on the retreat planning thread? Her reply came faster than expected. You were. Valora had you removed after Grandpa passed. Said you were pulling away. Pulling away. The way people phrase betrayal as distance, as if I walked out, as if I let go first. No one ever asked why I didn't speak up, why I didn't come, why I didn't post or call or attend. They just rewrote the absence to make it easier to ignore. When people leave you out long enough, you start telling yourself stories just to survive it. Maybe they forgot. Maybe they were overwhelmed. Maybe I was too quiet, too distant, too unapproachable. But the stories never really hold. Not once you see the truth written in JPEGs and half-truths. Later that afternoon, I pulled out a dusty photo album from a drawer I rarely opened. Not the digital kind. This one still smelled like glue and sunscreen. Folly Beach. 10 years ago. There was Dad taller than the rest of us, wearing his retreat or regret t-shirt, grinning like he hadn't already seen through all of us. In one of the photos, I wasn't holding the camera. I was in the shot, tucked between him and the railing. I hadn't wanted to be. He'd pulled me in at the last second and said, "No story's whole without the one who sees it." Back then, it had felt like a warm nudge. Now it felt like a warning I hadn't understood until too late. That photo was missing from Valora's album, too. By nightfall, I was back in my office. I opened the retreat album again, not to look at the photos, but to drag the entire folder into the trash. It wasn't a rash move. I didn't do it with shaking hands. I just did it. Then I opened a folder of my own. Retreat 2023. Notes. Empty for now, but not for long. I pulled out a copy of Dad's old estate file and laid it flat on the desk. I hadn't looked at it since the funeral. The first page was the trust document, the one Valora had insisted was already settled. But there were notes in the margin, things he'd underlined, circled, arrows pointing to terms I didn't recognize back then. They erased me from their photo, I whispered. Now I know they'd erase me from the deed too. I closed the folder and opened a separate one no one had access to but me. Inside, I placed the old picture from Folly Beach, the one where he'd pulled me in. He made sure I was seen. Maybe that's enough to start from. But the next email wasn't about Photoset, was about the house. And if they were ready to let go of the house, so was I. Just not the way they thought. It started with an envelope. A thin, cream-colored piece of mail tucked between junk flyers and a dental appointment reminder. My name was printed cleanly on the front, but the return address wasn't familiar, some third-party travel agency in Savannah. I almost tossed it, but something made me peel it open right there at the mailbox, keys still dangling from my other hand. Inside, a glossy card with shell patterns and calligraphy that read, "You're invited. Whitmore Family Retreat, Folly Beach, June 1417. At first, my stomach fluttered. A second later, it dropped. I wasn't invited. I knew that already. This wasn't for me. It had been sent by mistake. The RSVP QR code led to a digital portal. I scanned it anyway, heart thudding like it'd broken into someone else's mailbox. The guest list was pre-filled. Mom, Valora, Elson, Uncle Denny, Cousin Carla, me, nowhere. Not even in the optional +1 section. I stood there, the sun heating the back of my neck, the card curling slightly in my hand. This wasn't a reunion. It was a ritual I'd been scrubbed from. I went inside and set the envelope on the counter next to the coffee pot. Then I opened my laptop and searched the property listing database. Just curiosity at first. Idle speculation. But there it was. Folly Beach Retreat, now listed under C. Witt Holdings, LLC. Same address. Same front porch with the crooked lantern Dad never replaced. Status. For sale, tagline. Seller motivated. Price reduced. I stared at the screen. There was no family text, no phone call, no group email. Nothing about listing the house. Nothing about letting go of the one place that still smelled like saltwater and his aftershave. They weren't just letting go of me. They were burying the last piece of him that wasn't curated by Valoris Instagram captions. Later that afternoon, I sat at my desk again, aimlessly scrolling. That's when I saw a memory post from last year. A photo of Valora and Elson in front of a boutique bag, both grinning. Caption, "Birthday surprise for my baby girl. Nothing's too much when it's for love." The boutique name made my chest tighten. I remembered wiring the payment for that exact dress. I'd called the store, arranged the pickup, even confirmed Elson's size with the clerk. No one knew it was from me except the manager and my bank statement. But Valora had claimed it, just like she claimed the family thread, the beach house planning, the version of history where I never existed. It didn't hurt this time. It just tired me. There's a special kind of exhaustion that comes from being erased politely. That night, I created a new folder on my computer and labeled it Estate Research. No frills, no emotion, just a task. I opened a fresh document and typed the address of the house, then cross-referenced the LLC, the agent's name, date the listing went live, price changes, metadata. They'd hoped I wouldn't notice. They forgot I was the one who always read the fine print. By evening, the light outside had gone from amber to navy. I got up, stretched, and walked to the filing cabinet I hadn't touched since Dad's funeral. Middle drawer, back folder, labeled Dad Legal. I pulled it out and sat back down. There, tucked behind notarized copies and insurance documents, was the note he'd once scribbled in blue pen across a draft of the trust. If mishandled, fall back to Miss Daunt, let it sit idle. At the time, Id thought it was one of his cryptic reminders, something about money management or water lines. But now, it read like a breadcrumb trail. A message not for then, but for exactly now. And then I remembered what he'd told me the year before he died. Sitting on that same porch. It's not if they forget what matters. It's when. That's when you make your move. I leaned back in my chair, the folder still open in my lap. They thought listing the house would close the chapter. But I still had the pen. And if they were ready to erase the house, I was ready to re-sign it under my name. That night, I didn't sleep. Not out of rage, not even out of sadness, just an eerie, sharpened awareness. Like something had moved within me, quietly but permanently. Around 2 a.m., I opened my laptop again and typed out a name I hadn't thought about in years. George Landon. My father's oldest friend. A retired attorney. The kind of man who wore ties even to backyard barbecues and quoted case law at baby showers. I wrote a single-line email. George, did Dad ever mention a fallback clause in the trust? Something not in the official filing? His reply came just 45 minutes later. Thought you might ask someday. Attaching a scanned copy from his original draft. Use it wisely. The document loaded slowly, like the screen itself was hesitant to show it. But once it did, there it was. Calder's handwriting in thick blue pen along the margins of the estate paperwork. If mishandled, defaults to M House must remain insured, maintained. No disclosure, nurse forfeiture. I stared at the screen for minutes. It wasn't a backup plan. It was a lifeline quietly anchored to the one person he knew would show up when it mattered. It wasn't a loophole. It was a message. A decade earlier, Id stood beside him on the porch of that same house. We'd been arguing about something minor leaky gutters, I think, and he'd paused, looked out at the sea, then back at me. Tides, not waves, Maris. You think in tides. The others? They think loud. Keep your eyes open. Back then, I'd smiled like it was one of his quirky metaphors. But now I saw it for what it was. He wasn't waxing poetic. He was warning me, preparing me. The next morning, my phone buzzed before I even poured coffee. A friend from work had forwarded me a link. No subject line, just, "You've seen this, right?" I clicked. The headline was blunt. Estranged daughter manipulated father into signing away family estate. A picture of Valora in soft focus below it. Eyes somber, lips gently pressed together, like she was bearing the weight of tragedy. The article was riddled with half-truths. A close family source said I had isolated Dad in his final months, that I hadn't come home for Thanksgiving, that I'd refused to answer calls. The comment section was worse. Typical inheritance grab. She shows up after he dies and thinks she's owed something. Entitled, probably hasn't visited in years. The kind of digital judgment that required no facsimile volume. I didn't respond. Didn't call Valora. Didn't text Mom. Instead, I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it Contingency Media Defense. Inside, I dropped copies of every text Dad had sent me that year. Photos of my plane tickets, calendar invites, a voice memo of him saying, "Thanks for staying longer than anyone else." And then the fallback clause. I wasn't going to shout. That's what Valora expected. She was betting on me staying silent, on the optics winning. But I wasn't angry. I was methodical. There's a difference. I labeled every file with dates, cross-referenced every transaction, made a spreadsheet. If they wanted a story, I'd give them one, just not the one they wrote. By nightfall, I had printed the clause in color, slid it into a sleeve, and tucked it into a separate folder labeled simply Deed. Next to it, I placed Dad's old shell, the turquoise one he'd handed me the summer I turned 10, telling me to listen for the sea when I felt ignored. He didn't raise a woman who made noise. He raised one who knew when to sign. And there it was, proof, cold and clear, typed across every page of the deed. My name. I was still sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by documents fanned out like the blueprints of a quiet revolution. The laptop screen glowed dimly, half asleep, while the printer in the corner murmured every few minutes, scanning, copying, logging timestamps, like a silent witness. I had been working nonstop for hours, the kind of focus that narrows your vision and blots out the world. Then my phone buzzed, face down beside the folder marked Deed. I almost didn't check it. I was too deep in the rhythm, too determined. But then I saw the name. Elson. The message was short. I don't know what happened, but I still have the bracelet you gave me. I never forgot you. I read it once, then again. And then I put the phone down, slowly, carefully, like it was made of something fragile. My hands stayed on the table, palms flat. The words weren't elaborate, but they cracked open a part of me I hadn't touched in years. She remembered. 6 years ago, we'd been at a seafood place off the highway, nothing fancy, just shrimp baskets and paper napkins and lemonade in plastic cups. It was her birthday, and I had brought a small gift. A bracelet I had made by hand. Smooth pieces of sea glass threaded with copper wire. The same soft green-blue shade as the sky over Folly Beach at sunset. She'd slipped it onto her wrist like it was something precious and whispered, "I always wanted one like yours." In that moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, she would grow up to be different from her mother. Maybe she'd ask questions instead of making assumptions. Maybe she'd see me clearly, not through the filter of valorous bitter stories. That bracelet had been such a small thing, but it mattered. I left the kitchen and walked to my bedroom. I opened the closet and reached for the cedar box tucked high above the hanging coats, behind a stack of old manila files. The box still smelled like sandalwood and thyme. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside were fragments of my life. A photo of me during freshman year, beaming beside a bike with a broken chain. A flat stone I took from one of Dad's favorite hiking trails. A handwritten note in his blocky scrawl. And then, tucked beneath it all, was the letter. Still sealed. The envelope edges had yellowed with time, but the ink on the front was just as sharp as I remembered. Mom, Valora, Camille, and whoever else needs to hear it. I had written it 3 years ago, after yet another family celebration passed without a call, without an invitation, without even a second thought. I never sent it. Back then, part of me still held on to the smallest thread of hope, that maybe things could change, that maybe they'd wake up and see what they'd done, that maybe love would win out over image and convenience, but tonight felt different. I sat on the edge of the bed and peeled open the seal. The words came flooding back, as if they'd never left me. You've mistaken my distance for disinterest. It was survival. I stopped reaching out because I was tired of bleeding from the same place over and over. You pretend I disappeared, but you shut the door long before I stopped knocking. Each sentence hit like a drumbeat I knew by heart. At the bottom, I had written, I didn't want closure. I wanted something real. But maybe this is as close as it'll get. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just sat there in silence, the kind that isn't empty, but clean. Like the air after a storm. The clarity was strange, but welcome. I looked at the letter again, then whispered aloud, I didn't send this because I was still hoping. And now? Now I wasn't hoping anymore. I stood up, walked across the room, and fed the letter into the shredder bit by bit, piece by piece. Tiny curls of pain and unsent truth, dissolving into paper snow. I watched until the last corner vanished. Then I turned back to the box and reached in. There it was, the bracelet. Still intact, still beautiful. I held it in my hand, felt the way the copper had warmed from my skin. The message from Elson echoed in my head. She never forgot. Maybe the story they told about me hadn't erased everything. Maybe someone had seen me, not the version Valora painted, not the caricature Camille smirked about, but me. I walked back to the kitchen and laid the bracelet gently next to the folder marked Deed. Then I reopened the file. My fingers hovered over the first page. My name stared back in bold black letters. My name, full name, legal name. No more confusion, no more rewriting the truth. They had turned my silence into guilt, into shame. They used my boundaries as evidence that I had abandoned them when really they had cast me out long before I stopped knocking. But this wasn't a story. This was evidence. It was time to let the paper speak instead. I drove down early, a day and a half before anyone else was expected to arrive. The retreat was scheduled for a Friday afternoon check-in, and I parked 2 blocks away that Wednesday morning, cutting the engine in a rented sedan with out-of-state plates. I didn't want them to know I'd been here. Not yet. The house looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just outgrown what it had once meant. The porch swing was still crooked, tilted slightly left, as if someone had given up halfway through fixing it. The paint had faded near the railings, and the front lantern had been replaced with a cheap solar bulb that blinked like it was already tired of trying. I stood there for a moment, letting the sea air settle around me, like a memory I hadn't invited. Then I unlocked the front door. Inside, it smelled like dust and salt, and something faintly metallic, maybe disuse, maybe disrespect. I moved through the rooms one by one, checking light switches, opening windows to let the stale air out, closing drawers I didn't recognize. The champagne had been delivered just as I requested. Chilled. Bottled quietly under my reservation name, Miss Maris Enlow. The guest book had my details pre-filled. I flipped to the second page, wrote a note under special preferences. Cotton sheets only. Firm pillows. No visitors, not listed by name. I wasn't doing this for drama. I was reclaiming a place that had already been mine before Valora renamed it with hashtags and Hollow Family slogans. That evening, I walked the shoreline just behind the house. The tide was steady, unbothered by anything human. For a brief moment, I felt untouchable. Not powerful, not victorious, just solid, present. By 6:30 p.m., Friday, I was back inside, seated near the reception counter, with a book open but unread in my lap. The clerk glanced at me occasionally, unsure whether to make conversation. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. At 6:42, I heard the sound of tires on gravel. Valora's voice was the first to carry through the open doors, bright, performative. "We're here! 2 rooms ocean view, and we'll need the keys quickly, please." My mother gets overheated waiting. I watched from the shadows of the hallway as the clerk typed something into the reservation system. Then her expression shifted. "I'm sorry," she said carefully, "but I don't have your name on any booking for this weekend." Valora paused. "Excuse me?" The clerk glanced at the screen again. "The only reservation we have is under Miss Maris Enlow. Full property. 1 guest suite in use. No others authorized." Silence. Not the kind that fills space, but the kind that rearranges it. My heels echoed once as I stepped forward from the hallway, calm and deliberate. "You told me not to travel with you," I said, slipping my ID across the counter. So I traveled ahead. Valora's face tightened, like she'd swallowed something sharp. Idara looked down at her shoes. Elson stared at the floor, as if reading something no one else could see. "I don't know what game this is," Valora started. "No game," I interrupted. "Just reservations. Legal ones." I turned to the clerk. "Anyone not on the guest list can be politely escorted out. No need to make it uncomfortable. They're family." The clerk hesitated, then nodded slowly, reaching for the phone. Valora didn't argue. Not out loud. Her hands clenched into the handle of her weekender bag. Idara said nothing. She didn't even make eye contact. Else and she just followed behind them, silent as the ocean. They left the desk without a word. No yelling, no denial. Just a stiffness in their shoulders and the weight of something unspoken trailing behind them. I didn't follow. I watched their backs until the front door closed behind them, the sound dull and final. I breathed in, not relief exactly, but something adjacent. "They thought I'd disappear quietly," I said to no one. "But I've never been louder than I am in silence." And Valora wasn't finished. But neither was I. The article wouldn't go viral. It didn't need to. The courtroom was louder. Still, something in me knew there was one more wave coming. The morning after they left the retreat house, I woke before the sun, coffee already brewing by the time the sky turned that faded gray before dawn. I sat on the porch, elbows on knees, cup between my hands. The air was quiet, but it didn't feel like peace. It felt like tension holding its breath. They hadn't yelled. They hadn't fought me at the check-in desk. That wasn't their style anymore. Valora, especially, she'd long since learned that a whisper, positioned right, could shatter more than any shout. I stayed outside until the first email arrived. My phone buzzed against the porch rail. The name flashed across the top of the screen. Jacob Albright. I hadn't seen it in years. Jacob had once been one of my best students back when I used to teach part-time nonprofit journalism. Smart, curious, loyal to facts. He'd gone on to write for a mid-tier outlet covering regional legal battles, mostly boring estate fights and nonprofit frauds. He'd written to me before, birthday notes, a holiday card once, but this was different. Subject line, heads up, I didn't pitch this. I opened it. Attached was a draft of an article titled, Power Play or Legal Exploitation? Family Rift Over Legacy Estate. Halfway down the page, sources close to the family claim Maris Enlow isolated her father in the months before his death, urging him to rewrite trust documents in her favor. My mouth didn't fall open. My heart didn't race. I just read it. Line by line. They quoted a concerned relative stating I hadn't spoken to my mother in years, that I skipped major holidays, that I preferred independence over inclusion. It was sharp in the way gossip always is when it wants to sound reasonable. Jacob's note at the bottom read, I'm not the byline on this, but I thought you deserved to see it. Do with it what you need. I set the phone down, walked back inside, and opened the laptop again. This time, I didn't hesitate. One folder, Media Defense. Inside, I dragged everything. The video of Dad on the porch, voice firm, eyes clear, saying, This house should go to Maris. She's the one who showed up. Every receipt for plane tickets, every photo of me by his hospital bed, every calendar invite, even the screenshot of Camille texting, Shez too busy proving something to care about family. I didn't write a long rebuttal. I didn't call anyone. I simply attached the entire folder and typed out one sentence to Jacob. If you want to run a story, run the real one. Here's everything. I won't be speaking further. A few minutes later, he replied, Understood. I'll handle this right. That was it. No dramatics, no public plea, no comment thread war. They'd expected me to fold, again. To take the silent blow and swallow it, because that's what he'd done for years. That's what made me easy to erase. I made the erasing easy, but this time, I had the documents, the signatures, the shell company's formation date, the text from the realtor, the fallback clause handwritten in my father's pen. If they were ready to set fire to my name, they'd better be ready for the smoke. I closed the laptop, grabbed my keys, and stepped outside. The tide had pulled in higher than yesterday, brushing against the lower line of the dunes. I walked slowly toward the shoreline, the sand cool beneath my feet. They thought I'd vanish again, I said softly to myself. But this time, the tide's mine. I slid my phone into my back pocket and kept walking, not caring who rang next or what headline came after. The story wasn't going viral. No trending hashtags, no dramatic headlines. But the house was mine again, and so was the silence that came with it. Monday morning in Charleston came wrapped in heat. That courthouse kind of humidity, the kind that made your shirt stick to your spine, thick with tension, soaked in history. I parked a block away and walked the rest, a slim black folder in hand, my ID in my back pocket. No heels, no lipstick, no fanfare. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with artificial coolness. Still, there was something hanging in the air, something waiting to detonate. I took my seat. Front row, far left. Didn't need to glance at them to feel their presence flood in a few minutes later. Valora swept in wearing a beige suit she probably picked for optics. Beside her was Idara, oversized sunglasses shielding whatever guilt or pride lived in her face. And then came their Loyera man, who looked like a game show host, all charm and cologne, smiling like this was just another Tuesday. They made a small scene settling in. Whispered greetings, fake confidence, papers rustling with precision. I kept my hands folded in my lap. The judge entered. Older man, tired eyes. You could tell he'd seen families claw each other apart over far less than a deed. He read the case summary like it was just another line item on his docket, like it wasn't decades of memory and betrayal boiled down to a paragraph. Valorous lawyer stood. His voice carried that blend of theatrical confidence and condescension lawyers rehearse in the mirror. Your Honor, we contend that the trust in question was altered under questionable circumstances. The deceased was in cognitive decline. Miss Enlow had unusual access in his final months. He didn't say manipulative, but he might as well have. He glanced at me and smiled, like we were playing poker and he just laid down a royal flush. She missed Thanksgiving, was absent at Christmas, and yet somehow she becomes the sole beneficiary. They submitted highlighted documents, medical records, just enough facts to raise doubt, not enough to win. The judge turned to me. Miss Enlow, do you wish to respond? I nodded once, rose, walked to the media cart near the witness stand. My heels didn't click, my heart didn't race. I inserted the flash drive. No speech, no defense, just the truth. The screen flickered on. The lights dimmed slightly. My father appeared, seated on the back porch of the beach house, wrapped in his navy fleece jacket. The wind played in his thinning hair. You could hear the ocean soft, steady, eternal. He looked directly into the camera. I want Maris to have this place, he said, voice clear. Camille makes things loud. Maris makes them last. Valora shifted in her chair. Idara crossed her arms tighter. She stayed after the stroke. Never asked for anything, not once. He paused. Looked off into the horizon. Then back at the lens. It's not about fairness. It's about memory. The screen went black. No one moved. Even the judge sat a beat longer before clearing his throat. I returned to my seat. Still no words from me. 10 minutes passed. The judge leaned forward, removed his glasses. This court finds no credible evidence of coercion or undue influence. The testimony provided is both authentic and decisive. The deceased's intent is unmistakably clear. He paused again. The petition is denied. Property rights remain with Miss Maris Enlow. Silence. Valora's jaw tightened. Her lawyer leaned in to whisper, but she waved him off. Idara just kept adjusting the hem of her skirt like she could sew the moment back together if she folded it just right. No shouting, no slamming fists, just stillness. But it rang louder than anything they'd said in months. I stood, thanked the judge, walked out alone. The hallway outside buzzed with camera flashes and reporters holding out microphones like they were fishing poles. Miss Enlow, any comment? Did your father really sign that willingly? Do you feel vindicated? I kept walking. The black folder was still in my hand. Inside it, tucked between documents and receipts, was the bracelet Dad gave me the summer before everything broke. A simple chain with a single word etched inside. Steady. I didn't owe them a soundbite. Not anymore. The footage didn't change who Valora and Idara were. It didn't erase the years of silence or restore what they took from my mother or me. But it did one thing, it made something unshakable. Real. Permanent. I wasn't the side note anymore. I wasn't the helper. Or the shadow behind their spotlight. The house was mine. The silence was mine. And so, finally, was the story. The story wouldn't go viral. But the house was mine again. And so was the silence inside it. A week after the ruling, I came back to Folly Beach. No suitcase, no fanfare. Just me and the keys in my pocket. The porch creaked under my steps, but it didn't sound tired anymore. More like it exhaled. Curtains fluttered gently against the window frames. Light filtered through, as if the house had exorcised something. I stood there for a moment, just breathing. I wasn't trying to summon anything, just acknowledge that nothing was missing anymore. Inside, I walked through the rooms slowly, not checking, remembering. The kitchen still smelled like salt and lemon wood polish. The living room had the same uneven floorboard Dad never fixed. Even the silence had changed. It no longer pressed down. It expanded. I opened the door to the study last, the one they never entered, the one they never bothered to clean out. I hadn't either. Not really. The bottom drawer stuck, but I tugged it free. Inside, everything was just as it had been. A chipped mug, a legal pad with sketches of landscaping plans that never made it past the paper, and tucked in a corner, wrapped in a bandana, a wind chime. Shells, bits of sea glass, tangled wire. We made it when I was 10. Fishing lines strung through drilled holes, each shell marked with a date and initial. Some were worn smooth. One still had my childhood handwriting scratched faintly on its edge. I carried it to the table, untangled the knots carefully. No rush. No purpose but presence. Some strings had snapped and frayed. I rethreaded them. Not perfectly, but enough for it to hold shape again. Late afternoon, as the sky turned soft and golden, the gate creaked open. I turned, expecting a stranger or delivery. It was Elson. She held a small paper bag in her hands, looking too tall and too young at the same time. "Mom doesn't know him here," she said, before I could speak. She walked forward, pulled something from the bag. A photo. It was from the last retreat I'd attended years ago, before the exile. The one where I'd taken the group shot, set the timer, then ducked out of frame before it clicked. Only this photo had me in it. "You asked me to press the button," Elson said. "You'd already run back to the group when it went off. But Mom cropped the posted version. I kept this one. I didn't cry. I just looked at it, then at her. "Thank you for not forgetting," I said. She nodded. "You never stopped being family. They just stopped acting like it." We didn't say much after that. She left before the sun dipped fully, and I watched her go with the wind chime still in my lap. As night fell, I stood on a chair outside the kitchen window and hung the chime on the rusty hook that had waited a decade to be used again. It swayed lightly in the breeze, giving off soft, uneven notes. Not loud, not pretty, but real. "They said I left," I murmured. I didn't. They just stopped calling my name. Inside, I turned off the lights one by one. Not in sadness, intention. Kitchen, living room, hall, not closing chapters, choosing which ones to keep lit. I paused at the study, left the lamp on. That room, that drawer, that wind chime, those were still his, still mine. No one needed to apologize. No one would. But I no longer needed them to. I didn't need an apology to know who I was. I just needed a place where silence didn't feel like erasure. Some stories don't end with applause. They end with a closed door, a soft wind, and a name quietly reclaimed. If there's anything this journey has taught me, it's that sometimes your power doesn't come from being the loudest voice in the room, it comes from knowing when to speak and what proof to carry. Family doesn't just live in blood or last names, it lives in who shows up, who remembers you when the cameras aren't rolling, and who hands you the truth when everyone else is selling their version. Maybe you've been erased in a way that doesn't make headlines. Maybe your silence was mistaken for surrender. If this story stirred something in you, maybe you've just been waiting to be called back too. I want to hear from you. Have you ever been written out of your own story, or had to reclaim something that was always yours? Leave a comment below, just type 1 if this resonated with you, or share where you're watching from. If it didn't connect, tell me why I genuinely want to understand your side. And if this video touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss the next story. There's always more to tell, and maybe the next one will be yours.